Well, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Church on the Move and part 2 of this series that we started last weekend called Enough. And we're talking about those feelings of inadequacy, those feelings of, self-esteem, negative self-esteem, whatever you want to call it. We all struggle with this, that sometimes when we look in the mirror, we lay our heads on the pillow at night, we have a voice that comes into our mind that reminds us that we're not enough. We look in the mirror, I'm not skinny enough, or we look in the mirror, I'm not talented enough, I'm not young enough, my life has passed me by. Whatever it is, all of us have those things that we wrestle with where there are moments of weakness where we feel inadequate. And the truth is, we feel that way more than we care to admit. For a lot of us, we just go through our lives busy, doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm convinced that so much of our busyness is just a disguise. It's just a mask or maybe a numbing agent to just keep us from facing the reality that there's things about us and things on the inside of us that we are unsatisfied with, that we don't like about ourselves. But we kind of go and we go just to avoid facing the reality. And all of this feeling and all this junk that's kind of lurking beneath the surface is really motivated by this fear. We talked about it last week, and it's simply this, that if you know who I was really, you wouldn't like me. What we're looking for is connection with other people. What we want is to have somebody else see us for who we are and to accept us and to love us as we are, even with all of our flaws. The problem is that we fear that people would reject us if we put ourselves out there. If you knew who I was really, if you knew about my past, if you knew that I'd had an abortion, if you knew about some of the stuff that I've done, if you knew the real me, you wouldn't want to be around me. You wouldn't want to hang out with me. You would reject me. And so many of us just keep our issues, our struggles, our problems to ourselves. And in this sort of tragic twist of irony, we sabotage ourselves from the thing we want the most, because what we're looking for is to connect with other people. What we're looking for is real, authentic relationships. But because of this fear, we feel like we can't have that. So we put up these masks, we put up these walls, we put out this persona that says, hey, I've got it all together. And so if that's, for many of us, that's the only us that anybody ever really sees. Is the us that we want everybody else to see, the perfect husband or the perfect wife with the 2.5 kids and the happy family and everything's together, everything's good, we're fine, thanks very much, we don't need any help. And that's kind of what we put out there for everybody. And we build this wall, we build this persona, this mask that we kind of carry around, and consequently nobody ever gets in. Nobody ever really knows the real us. And it keeps us from the thing that we want the most, which is to connect with somebody else, to have somebody connect with us and see us for who we really are. And so many of us, we just end up carrying all of this around for our entire lives. What we're really talking about, kind of the thing beneath the thing here, is something called shame. And shame is different than guilt. Here's kind of a working definition for both of them. Guilt is, I did something bad. We all know what that feels like. We did something that we shouldn't have done, and we feel guilty for it. But shame is when guilt becomes personal, when it moves beyond just I did something bad to I am bad. And for a lot of us, this is what we think about ourselves. When we see ourselves in the mirror, when we put our heads on the pillow at night, this is how we feel. There's something defective in me. There's something wrong with me. It's no longer just I did something wrong, but I am wrong. When God was passing out gifts or nature or whatever it is you want to call it, whenever everything was sort of being distributed, something was left out of me because I'm incomplete. I'm not enough of what I'm supposed to be. The problem in this marriage, the problem in this equation is me. I am the problem because I'm just simply lacking what I need to be who I am supposed to be. And so many of this, as we just wrestle with this, and because we're afraid to kind of be open about it, because we're afraid to let anybody else see what we're really feeling, we never end up connecting with anybody else. And we carry this shame around to our own destruction, because shame is an incredibly destructive force. In doing research for this series, I read the book Daring Greatly, which is by Brene Brown. It's an incredible book on this topic if you're interested. And in the book, she quotes a University of Texas study that I think is fascinating. And what they found out was they studied people who'd been through very traumatic circumstances, situations that no one would want to ever have to go through. Specifically, they studied victims of rape and incest. And what they found was that the people who had been through these terrible tragedies, they studied two different groups of people. People who shared their experiences with somebody else, someone trusted in their life, they shared them, and then others who just kept those secrets to themselves and never told anybody about them. And what they found was that the people who kept that shame to themselves, often the effect of keeping it to themselves was more traumatic than the actual event itself. Shame thrives in secrecy. It grows in the dark. Consequently, it begins to die, and and your heart begins to heal the moment light comes in. Healing doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with being honest, with being open about who you are and what you're struggling with. And many of us, we cannot find the healing that we're looking for. We're not making the progress in our lives that we want to make simply because we're trying to do this by ourselves, and we're holding all of our challenges, all of our struggles, all of our issues inside, and it's eating us alive from the inside out. So here's what I want to do today, and today's message will be very simple, but as I've said before, simple isn't always easy. I want to ask you a question. In fact, I want to ask you to do something or to consider something. And then I'm going to give you the reasons why you're not going to want to do it, because I know already when I ask you to do this, you're not going to want to do it. In fact, you're going to have a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do it or you don't need to do it. So what we're going to do is make a challenge, kind of make a request here, ask if you'll be willing to do something, and then I want to just kind of kick the legs out from your reasons why you don't want to do it, and then we'll kind of wrap it up in what I think is going to be a really powerful and memorable way as we kind of go out of here today. So here's the question. Here's kind of what we're driving at. It's this. Who has access in your life to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? Who in your life has access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? Now, here's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that everybody needs access to your story, that you shouldn't go around, hey, I'm Whit, let me tell you all of my secrets, this is what's happening and been happening in my life. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about being strategic with 1, 2, maybe 3 people in your life who you say, I want to be strategic with you. I want to give you access to my story, my struggle, and my secrets. Because here's what I know. Most of us go our whole lives without ever being intentional about this. In fact, at best, we sort of do this unintentionally. At worst, we avoid this at all costs. We stay away from it. Now, the first person that should have access, if you're married, is your spouse. You should give access to your spouse, your story and your struggle and your secrets. But I want to push past that, because for many of you, that's going to be the first place that you go, and you're going to say, well, my spouse knows kind of pretty much everything that there is to know about me. But I want to push a little further than that, because here's what I believe. I believe that every guy needs another guy, and I believe that every girl needs another girl in their life to just be open with. Why? Because there are some things that your wife will never be able to relate to about being a man that only another guy can help you with. And vice versa, there are only some things that another woman can feel that you feel that your husband, no matter how hard he tries, will never be able to relate to. So let's just ask the question this way. Who outside of your spouse has access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? Your story is your past, where you've been, what makes you you, what makes you the person that you are, what's your history, why are you the way that you are? If you have an anger problem, what kind of caused all that? Why is that? Did you have a father who maybe had these impossible standards of perfection that you tried to live up to, and your dad's long gone, but you're still trying to live up to those standards of perfection? And it's just messing with your life a little bit. Or maybe for you, your parents were divorced, and the pain of that separation is still messing around with you. It's still something that you deal with day in and day out, and it's a painful thing for you. And you don't really share it with anybody. It's not something that you've really told too many people, but it's just kind of lurking back there in your past. What's your story? What's happened in your life? What makes you you? Does anybody have access to that part of your life? Does anybody have access to your struggles? Your struggles are kind of what's happening right now. What you're dealing with right now, just the day-to-day stuff, the issues that are going on in your life, just right now, what's happening in your life. Maybe your struggle for many of us, I know this is a common thing. It's just an occasional porn problem. You just occasionally you get online and you didn't mean to, but you look at porn and it's just one of those things that happens. We talk about this a lot because it's so common. Guys especially are dealing with this, but it's not just guys. People, men, women are having these issues dealing with this stuff, and we tell ourselves that we can handle it on our own, and there's nobody that really have given access to or been intentional about saying, hey, this is a struggle of mine because it's a little embarrassing and I'd rather not talk about it, but it's just kind of there and it's something that I deal with. Does anybody have access to that part of your life? Does anybody know about that relationship at work? Just that one that's kind of crossed the line, not physically, nothing's ever happened and you don't intend for anything to happen, but it's just a little flirty and you know that it shouldn't be that way. But again, you can handle it. You got it on your own. Does anybody, have you allowed anybody access to just know that's a struggle of mine? This is something that I'm kind of wrestling with. For some of you, it's a health issue. You're very private, although, some of your issues you kind of wear on the outside. You can see it's sort of plain to everybody, but you don't talk about it. It's not something that you deal with. You're very uncomfortable talking about it. You don't let it out there. You don't talk much about it. You just kind of try to disguise it and hide it. Is anybody aware of your struggles, of what you're wrestling with on the inside? Or maybe for you, the last 3 times you and your husband have tried to get pregnant, they've ended in miscarriages. And as ridiculous as it sounds, you're making it personal. It feels like for you that you're the problem, that something's wrong with you. And that even though you know that's not right, that you can't help but beat yourself up. And you're really wrestling with this. And what is it that you're struggling with? Is there anybody at all that has access to what's going on in your life? Anybody that can speak into your life? And then is there anybody that has access to your secrets? The parts of yourself that you hope never come out. The things that you hope no one ever finds out. The stuff that's kind of hidden away in a deep, dark corner that for some of us, there's some pretty serious consequences if that is ever exposed. If anybody ever knew about that, I would be in pretty serious trouble. But does anybody have access to that stuff? And here's why this is so important, because these things, they grow in the dark. They don't minimize, they don't get smaller over time, and they suffocate you. They eat you alive from the inside out. And if you let it out in the open, yes, it may be painful initially, but the good news is healing can begin then, because healing can't begin until you're willing to be open about your story, your struggle, and your secrets. So who has access to these things in your life? Science is telling us that this is the way that this works. Psychology is telling us that this is the healthiest route. The scripture's been saying it for a long time. In fact, this is Paul. He wrote this a couple thousand years ago. Look what he said. He said, this is how a Christian community, this is what a church is really to look like. He was writing to a church in Galatia, and this is what he said in Galatians 6. Look at what Paul wrote. He said this, carry one another's burdens. He said, in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. The law of Christ was just Jesus' way of kind of summing up everything that the Old Testament law was about, which was just simply this, to love your neighbor as yourself. That's what he's referring to here. Paul is saying this. He's saying that when a church or a group of people gather together, that the role of the gathering, the point of the gathering is not just so that we can get together so that we can be taught. The point of the gathering is so that we can get together and carry one another's burdens. Did you know that's what a church is? A church isn't a building or a place, although that's what people think about as I'm going to church. We think of church as a place, as a location. But a church isn't walls and a steeple and a bunch of, steel and stained glass and all that kind of stuff. That's not what a church is. A church, the actual original word, which is sort of mistranslated church, the original Greek word is this word ekklesia. It just means gathering. It means a congregation, a group of people. That's what Jesus was trying to build, is a gathering of people. Why do we gather together? If it's just for the efficiency of communication, just to get everybody in one room so I can teach you or we can teach you all at the same time, there are more efficient ways to do that. We could do it over radio or through the internet or through television. You could stay at home. There's no point to coming here. The reason you come here is for this, so that you can have real relationships in your life where people can know the real you and you can know the real them, and you can help each other. We can help each other by carrying each other's burdens. That's the reason that we gather. Otherwise, we could do this in a much cheaper way. This whole building and all these lights and sound system, it's a tremendous waste of money. But this is why we gather. And the reason that we do sections and the reason that we do house-to-house groups and the reason that one of our 5 values is we church, not me church, is because we believe in coming to church and having more than just a buddy to sit by when you come, but that you have somebody that really knows what's going on in your life. Who has access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? And then even 1,000 years before this, Solomon, the wisest king, who ever lived, King Solomon, this is what he said. He said, whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. In other words, the reason when we isolate ourselves and we hold on to all this ourselves, he said, ultimately it's selfish. We're going to find that out. It feels sometimes courageous, or we fool ourselves into thinking it's courageous or somehow selfless, that we're being very unselfish by taking all this on ourselves, but it's not unselfish. We're ultimately seeking our own desires, and he says, and when you do that, you're breaking out against all sound judgment. In other words, logic, wisdom, anything you want to consult science, consult philosophy, religion, whatever, everybody's pointing to the same thing, saying, hey, it's bad for you when you keep this stuff inside. Any way you look at it, it's not healthy for you. And yet, this is exactly what we do. We try to hold on to this stuff. We try to deal with it ourselves, and we fool ourselves into thinking that we can. So this week in preparation for this, I started thinking about, okay, what's the reasons? Why don't I want to do this? Why do I want to avoid this? Why would I rather not do this? And I came up with 4 reasons, which I kind of think are sort of the top 4 reasons. There's probably more. You might think of another one when we're talking about this, but these were the 4 kind of major reasons that I thought that most of us don't want to do this and don't want to open up our lives. The first reason was this: I can handle it on my own. I got this. I got it. I don't need any help. I don't need anybody's help. I can handle this by myself. It's funny because we live in a culture, we live in a society, a world that glorifies the individual hero. You got the Lone Ranger and Rambo, and if Rambo didn't need any help to take down the entire army, then I don't need any help with my little problem over here. And what we tell ourselves, and especially men, this is something that men wrestle with, is that we feel like that it's manly to handle your own business, that it's weak to admit that you have a problem. That if you have to go to your buddy and say, hey, I'm dealing with something, I'm going through something, that's somehow weaker, that the real tough guys, the people who we admire, Batman and Indiana Jones, and this is what we've grown up with. Don't think that doesn't have a psychological impact on you. Don't think that it doesn't play into your decision-making process. We think those are just entertainment, but the truth is we internalize that stuff and we look at it and we say, hey, it's weak if I have to share with somebody that I'm struggling with something. So we tell ourselves that we're being very strong by saying that I can handle this on my own. I got this. I don't need anybody else's help. I've got it. The truth is, it's not strength at all. It's not courage at all. It's actually fear. Because when you think about it, and I challenge you to think about it right now, if you think about the real reasons why you don't want to do this, it's not courage. You're not telling yourself, I don't want to share this with anybody else because I'm so courageous. You don't want to share it with anybody else because you're afraid of what they'll think of you. Can I just say, in my experience, every decision that I've ever made based on fear has never been a good decision. This doesn't work. You can't handle it on your own. There are a lot of struggles, and everybody has them. And the sooner we admit that and say, I've got a situation that I'm dealing with, and I could use some help, I need you to know what's happening in my life, the healthier we will all be. This doesn't work. The second reason is this: I've been hurt. For many of us, the reason that we don't want to open up is because we've experienced some very real and legitimate pain in our lives. Relational pain, situational pain, the pain of loss. We have experienced some very real pain. For some of you, you've experienced the pain of betrayal. Maybe a parent betrayed you, a close friend betrayed you, somebody that you gave your heart to, that you trusted in, and they stabbed you in the back. For some of you, maybe a spouse betrayed you. And the pain of that betrayal cut so deeply and hurt so bad that you told yourself you would never put yourself in that position again. And the way you do that is you just keep everyone at arm's length. For some of you, this is why your relationships don't last, because you're never really willing to give your heart over fully to anybody else. So you just bounce from relationship to relationship to relationship, fearing commitment. Because in commitment means giving your heart, and that's just too big of a risk for you because you were burned or you saw what happened to your parents and you want nothing to do with that, so you just keep people at arm's length. For some of you, it's the fear of loss. Maybe you've experienced a tragic loss in your life. Or for some of us, we've not really maybe even experienced a tragic loss, but we just live with the sense that that loss is possible. And it sours all of our experiences. When we're having a great moment, in the back of our minds, we think, what if the worst case scenario happens? What happens if something happens to my kids or my spouse or whatever? What happens if this all goes south? What happens if I lose it all? And so we never really enjoy life. And we never really fully give ourselves over to these joyful moments because we just don't want to get hurt like that. So we just kind of keep life at sort of arm's length. For others of us, it's the pain of rejection. Maybe you put yourself out there, you risked something, you took a chance, and you put yourself out there, and you feel like you were rejected. And maybe it was an idea. Maybe, in fact, it's a series of ideas. Maybe you've shared your ideas at work over and over and over again, and nothing happens. It just keeps falling on deaf ears. And so after a while, it's just like, you know what? I get the memo. They don't like what I'm doing. They don't like what I have to say. You're just not willing to share and risk anymore. You're just not willing to put yourself out there. And there's ideas and there's dreams in you, but you're too terrified of being rejected again that you just won't take the step. Many of us, we're more afraid of failure or being seen as a failure than actually failing. And so we don't take the risks that we should take. And we live life like this, just with everyone and everything at sort of an arm's distance. And we tell ourselves that by doing this, we keep the pain away. The problem is, if you try to keep the pain away, you also keep life away. You keep love away. This is no way to live your life because you're not really living. You're only sort of halfway going through life, not really experiencing the richness and the beauty that's there to be had every single day. And what I can tell you is that from people who have experienced real loss, what they would tell you is that you should cherish every moment rather than trying to live like this to minimize the pain, because it doesn't work. The third reason is perhaps, I think, maybe the most tricky or whatever. It kind of fools us. It's the easiest to sort of slip by, and it's this one. I don't want to burden anybody. It feels so unselfish. It feels so good. I don't want to put my problems on anybody. People don't need to hear about my stuff. Nobody cares about what's happening in my life. And to be sure, there is a time and a place for sharing your struggles and your burdens with other people, and just running around telling them to anybody and everybody or doing it on Facebook is not the place to do this. And for many of us, and I feel sorry for the people who do, who just kind of vent and just sort of dump out everything that's happening in their lives on Facebook, the reason that they do it is because they have nobody else to talk to. And they're hurting, and they're looking for intimacy, but Facebook is not a place to find intimacy. It's not a place to be known really by other people, but it's a cry for help. It's a desperation call that I need somebody in my life. And unfortunately, they have no one. What you're looking for is someone strategic that you can share this information with, someone who can bear the weight of what you're going to share with them. And that means that this is not your children. Your children are not the people that you need to be going to saying, hey, honey, here's what's happening in my life, because your kids are not able to bear the weight of the stuff that's happening in your life. They're not meant to. That's why you need to find somebody. But when you do, and when you have somebody in your life, don't fool yourself by thinking that they don't want to hear about your struggles or your problems. We tell ourselves that this is some noble thing, but really it's just another form of control. It's just another way of kind of keeping everything to ourselves. And what we're really doing, and it feels unselfish, is actually selfish because we're robbing the very people who want to help us the most of the opportunity to do so. The people who want to love us the most, we're robbing them of even the right to choose, because when I say I don't want to burden you, it's the same as saying I will not give you a choice. You don't even have the option to love me because I'm not going to let you know what's happening in my life. And what I would say is just don't deny me. And I stand for the person who wants to help you, whoever you are. I would just say don't deny us the opportunity to love you, because we do care about you, just by fooling yourself and thinking that you're doing me a favor by keeping it to yourself. You're not, because there are people around you who love you and want to help you. But as long as you keep it to yourself, you're denying them the opportunity. And it's not a selfless act, it's actually quite a selfish act. And then the fourth reason, which is perhaps The biggest of them all, in fact, I think it's the reason underneath the reason, because all of these reasons are motivated by fear. And it's simply this: I fear the consequences. I fear what would happen if I was to tell my story, if I was to share what I'm struggling with, if I was to talk about my secrets. I fear the consequences. I fear how people would see me. I fear what might happen. For many of us, the consequences are very real and the stakes are very high. Because to let out what we have done means there will be some very serious consequences. For some of us, we might lose a relationship that we care deeply about. For others of us, it might be a job that we lose, if we're honest. For some of us, it might mean a marriage is on the line. I have no doubt that someone's wrestling with that as we speak, because there's enough people in here and there's enough things that go on. I just know human nature. You know what will happen if you talk about what you've done. And yet here's what I can promise you. And the thing we fool ourselves into thinking is that if I let this out, the consequences of letting it out will be far worse for me than keeping it in. And I can tell you that's just not true. Healing cannot begin until you're willing to be honest. That's why when you read through the New Testament, particularly the writings of Paul, one of the things he says over and over and over again is don't deceive yourself. Stop fooling yourself. This is what we do. We lie to ourselves more than anyone else. We lie to others, but we lie to ourselves most of all, feeling like that the best thing we can do is to keep this to ourselves. But until we get it out in the open, it can't begin to heal, because you can't solve a problem you're not willing to admit you have. And when you're not honest about it, it's the same as denying that there's a problem in the first place. And this is why we don't do this, because we fear the consequences. This past week, as I was getting ready for this message and our time together, I wanted to meet with several of our pastors. So I gathered a bunch of them together. We were sitting around a table and just talking about this, and we were wrestling with this question, who has access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? And I was asking just each one of them, do you have somebody in your life? And as we were going around the table, I came to my friend Stephen, and I asked him, does anybody have access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? And he said, well, they didn't. And of course, we knew Stephen's story. We knew kind of what had happened in his life, but he began to share about a particular moment in his story that I'd never heard before that was, I thought, so powerful. In fact, when he shared it, it just kind of sucked all the air out of the room, and it was just kind of a moment there for all of us. It's just like a, wow, it was so impactful that after a lot of conversation, I asked Stephen if he would be willing to share a little bit of his story, because it is just so profound. So I want to invite my friend Stephen Posey. He's one of our pastors. I want to invite Stephen to come. If you give him a big round of applause as he comes up here. Thanks for being brave enough and courageous enough to come do this, Stephen. I know this isn't easy. Stephen, some of us here I know your story, but a lot of us, we don't know. We haven't been around you. You've had, well, the fact that you're sitting here right now is pretty much a miracle. And I think you'll see why. But the last 3.5, 4 years of your life have been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And a lot's happened. And why don't you just kind of fill everybody in so we can all kind of get on the same page?
Yeah, I don't think you use the word miracle lightly there. I mean, a miracle is something that only God can do, and the fact that I'm sitting here is very much a miracle. There's something that happened 4 years ago that really before all that happened, I would have said my life was, I had kind of a dream situation. Out of college, I married my dream girl, and tall, beautiful girl, and she's smart, and she loved me, and she was everything that I wasn't. And a few years into our marriage, we had a beautiful kid, and I had an awesome job that I loved, kind of a dream job to be able to work here. And about 13 years into working here, everything kind of came unraveled. You talk about the struggles and the secrets, and those things kind of got out of control. They got out of control. I found myself in a relationship with a woman that was not my wife. And knew I needed help and was not brave enough to ask for it. And I got caught. And I remember the weekend very well. I had to go and sit down and meet with your dad. And I had to face my sin. I had to face my secret in a way that was, it was shameful. And I had to tell my wife. And the season that followed that weekend was without a doubt the darkest, most painful season of my life. But I had a wife that was strong and was willing to try to work on it. And she's no pushover, but she saw that I wanted to try to make it right, and we took steps to do that. We went through counseling, and it was a very long process, but at a certain point, she took me out to lunch, and she said, "I just want you to know that I forgive you." And through tears and through another long process, we were able to, God saved our marriage. And a couple of years into that process, I really felt like maybe someday I could be back in ministry again. Didn't know if it was possible, but I just decided I was going to try to live my life in such a way that if the opportunity presented itself, that I'd be ready. And sure enough, about 3.5 years in, as you know, we started talking again, and here I am.
Yeah. In fact, Stephen has been on staff here at Church on the Move for about a month now. He's one of our pastors again, and it's just a testament to the amazing grace of God, of what is possible in someone's life. So, unbelievable. All right, Stephen, let's just talk about kind of before all of this happened. I know a little of your story. I kind of know what happened, but you were not the stereotypical, I saw this coming, I could totally spot it in you. You weren't like the wild guy growing up or any of that, just somebody who was like, hard to pin down, whatever. You were pretty straight-laced. You had a pretty straight-laced upbringing. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I think when the news broke, I think a lot of people were shocked. Most everyone who heard the news, I think, was shocked because I was a pretty good guy. I was the guy that was not afraid to tell my friends about Jesus in high school.
Yeah.
I've never been drunk. I've never been high. I was a virgin when I got married. As far as my spiritual resume, it all looked really good, but there was this secret, and so yeah, I wasn't the kind of guy that you would think would do something like this, yet I did.
And so you didn't have a whole lot of a story, as we've been talking about. Your background and your story was I think you said grew up in a pastor's home, third generation pastor.
That's right.
Yeah. So you didn't have like this big awful background to talk about, but you did have a struggle.
Yeah.
Before any of this kind of happened, something that you were dealing with that nobody had access to.
Yeah, my struggle, if you had asked me 10 years ago, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would have been able to tell you. And it's something you mentioned earlier. It's something that I think a lot of guys struggle with. But for some reason, I was afraid to share it with anybody, but it was pornography. I occasionally looked at pornography, and then I'd say, "God, forgive me," and Lord, just take this away from me. And then just felt like I could just buck up and read scriptures, and then I'd be great. And
handle it yourself.
I can handle it myself. Yeah. Thought I could do it myself, and it worked for a little while, for a couple of months, several months, and then it would go bad. And slowly but surely, I could just see, I got to do something about this. I've been dealing with this thing long enough. When am I going to be done with it? And I just never broke through and told somebody and asked for help.
You're never intentional about it, never
Exactly.
on purpose with it. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Have you ever been intentional with this? Stephen, just before everything kind of went south, on that summer where things went bad for you, the other day when we were talking, you referenced a phone call, a very particular phone call, kind of the phone call that never was. That was something that you look back on with some regret.
Yeah, yeah. One of the worst decisions or lack of decisions I think I've made. I knew that this relationship with this other woman that was not my wife was that it was a kind of a combustible situation, that it was that a certain line was crossed. She knew, and I knew, and I was scared. I thought, this is not something I've ever dealt with before, and I've got to tell somebody. So I actually picked up the phone to call my boss, my best friend at the time, your brother, and just to ask for help. I didn't know where the conversation was going. I didn't know what I was going to say. As the phone's ringing, I'm thinking, what am I going to say? How am I going to break this to him? And right before he picks up the phone, I hang up. And I tell myself a couple of things. One, I just start thinking, man, there are thousands of kids coming to camp this summer. I'm one of the main communicators. If I back out now, this is May. Kids are coming in June. If I back out now, it's going to make a worse impact than maybe I can just put this thing off for a few weeks, a couple of months, and then we can deal with it. And I'm just gonna man up, and I'm just gonna cut this thing off, and I'm just gonna willpower my way through this, and then we'll deal with it later. And
you never made it.
I never made it. Yeah, I mean, there's a proverb we talked about that says, "A righteous man sees danger and hides, but the simple, the fool, passes on and is punished." And I think in that moment, I very clearly fooled myself.
Wow. Stephen, there was a turning point for you. We've talked about it. Just a moment where you did eventually get honest after kind of everything had come out, but there was still a moment of honesty that needed to happen. Why don't you tell us about it?
Well, after the news broke, and after my wife knew, after I'd lost my job, lost my longtime friends, family members wouldn't talk to me, and I understood why, but there was a particular night where I really, really was in a bad place, and I left the house, and honestly didn't know what I was going to do. I called my one friend. There's one guy that I thought maybe he could help, and it was my buddy Mark, and I just said, "Mark, man, you know the story. Tonight I'm in a bad place. I don't know what I'm going to do." And he said, "Stephen, if you don't come to my house right now, I'm coming to get you." He's a divorced guy, and his kids were out of the house that weekend, and so he said, "You can sleep in my kids' room." And that night, I remember sleeping on this little bitty kid's bed, and I really wasn't sleeping. I just sat there looking up at the ceiling thinking, how in the world did I get here? Like, what happened? I mean, I've lived this good life. I've helped people. I've done everything I knew to do, and there's just this one little bitty thing that turned into a big thing, and it got out of control, and I lost everything. And honestly, I was very mad at myself, but I was also very mad at God. And I just thought, God, how could I have done all this good, and now this? I mean, I feel like I'm utterly alone. And in that moment, it was touch and go. I mean, not just everything else in my life, the most important thing, my relationship with God. I just thought the pain is too much. I just thought to turn towards God means I gotta face some pain. And I thought that night that maybe I would turn my back on God and live however in the world I wanted to live that from then on. But the best way I know to describe what happened that night is a verse in Psalm 119, 136 that says, God, turn my heart to you and not towards selfish gain. And in that moment, I felt there wasn't an audible voice, there wasn't an angel appeared, but I felt like God reached into my heart and just turned it towards him. And I just said, God, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to lose my wife. I don't know if I'm going to lose my daughter. I don't know if I'll ever get my relationships back with my friends. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with the people that I respect the most at this church again, but I'm going to follow you. And it was a long process from that moment on, but I felt the peace of God, and there was a grace upon my story from that moment on. And I should not be sitting here right now, but through the grace of God and through that moment of honesty, I think God in his loving outstretched arms pulled me out of the miry clay and set my feet on a rock, and now my feet stand firm. And it's because of his grace that I'm here today.
Unbelievable. One last question, Stephen, and I know the answer to it already, but I just want to ask. I remember asking you over there, does anybody have access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? You said before they didn't. How about now?
Absolutely. There are a couple of guys, one of whom, he took the first step and just said, hey man, if you ever need to talk.
Yeah.
And opened the door for me to say, yeah, I'd love that. And now I've got 2 or 3 guys that that aren't impressed with me. They have, for lack of a better word, a pretty good BS filter with me.
Yeah.
And so they can call me,
Yeah.
and that gives such security, and that gives such confidence that, man, no matter which way life goes, I've got friends that are gonna reach across and help me help me in my struggles.
Well, they may not be impressed with you, but I am. Thank you for doing this, my brother. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a seat real quick. It takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of bravery to do what he just did. And it's going to take you a lot of courage to take the step that you know you need to take. For many of you, just opening up to someone for the first time. Maybe in a long time, maybe ever in your life. So I just want to circle this thing back around to where we got started. Who in your life has access to your story, your struggle, and your secrets? And here's what I know. I know that right now, God's Holy Spirit is working on hearts all over this place, in our lobby, online. He's working on people. But I also know this, that here in a minute when we dismiss the service and you go back to your life, your mind's going to be flooded with all kinds of reasons, all kinds of excuses, honestly, just all kinds of stuff, emails, texts, phone calls you need to return, decisions you need to make about lunch, and you're going to find every reason in the world why you're not going to do this or why what we talked about today does not apply to you. So I just want to strike while the iron is hot. And I want to ask everybody in here to do one thing, just a simple thing. It won't be easy, but it's simple, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab your cell phone. Would everyone just grab your phone? If you brought a phone in here, and I know you brought a phone in here because I see you guys playing with them during the service. It's all right, I do too. Grab your phone, and even if you're not going to do this, grab your phone because you're going to help the person next to you. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to grab your phone, and I want you to open it up and start a text. There's somebody in your life that you know you can open up to. There's somebody you've been thinking about, not just a general person, but a specific person with a name and a face. And chances are you've been thinking about this person this entire time. There's somebody that's a little further down the road than you, somebody who you respect, somebody you feel like I could reach out to and I could just ask them one simple question, and it's this. I just want you to text them this. Can we talk? Can we talk? I don't know what's going to happen from there, but at least the snowball will start rolling down from the top of the hill. At least the process will have begun. Can we talk? Would you be brave enough just to start that text, type that out, and hit send before you can even think about it? Some of you, this will be a life-saving moment for you. Don't let this be the phone call that never was. Choose now to say, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to open up to somebody. I'm going to share what's happening in my life because I can't do this on my own. And I was fooling myself when I thought that I could. I've texted a couple of guys this weekend. I already knew a little bit about this, but just to re-up my commitment, just to let them know, you're my guy. You're the guy I'm coming to. You have access to my life. You can ask me anything you want to ask me. You see anything going on in my life that looks a little bit weird, you've got access. Who is that for you? Some of you are thinking of somebody that needs your help. Not to say that you don't need anybody's help, but you know of somebody who they're headed towards a bridge and they don't know that the bridge is out and they're on their way down a path that is not going to be good for them. And you feel like the last friend left standing in the road going, please don't go that way. The bridge is out. And you're thinking of them and they've not invited you into their life. But maybe this is just the Holy Spirit speaking to you, whispering to you. Just send them a text. Can we talk? I don't know, maybe if we get proactive, we can save some people from destruction. Maybe we can help some people. And then I can't help but think, in fact, I know there are dozens of people in this room who are saying, Whit, I don't know anybody. I've got nobody in my life, nobody that I can talk to. You're asking me to think of somebody or text somebody, but quite honestly, the friends I have are not the people that I want to be talking to about the issues that I've got. I don't have anybody that I can trust. What do I do? Unfortunately, there's not, like a 5-minute guide to forming great friendships that are lifelong and last, or very deep or whatever. I mean, that doesn't exist. Trust is built over time, I think we get that intuitively. But that's why we do sections. That's why we do house-to-house groups. That's why we believe in We Church, Not Me Church, because we believe in facilitating connections. Again, not just so you can have a buddy that you sit by when you go to church, but so that you can build lasting relationships. And a lot of you are plugged into this sections thing, house-to-house thing, but there's still a lot of you that aren't. You're just kind of waiting on the sidelines going, that's not for me. Nobody wants to see my house. Nobody wants to hear about my junk. Get over it. Get over it. God wants to do something in your life if you're just willing to take a risk and put yourself out there and say, here am I. This is who I am. And then some of you are here. There's a few of you here, I'm sure you're saying, Whitman, I'm dealing with some stuff right now, today, that, I don't have like 2 months. I need to talk to somebody right here, right now. As always, we have a room right over here called The Healing Place. We have pastors in there, friends in there. We would love nothing more than to hear your story and to be there for you, to pray with you, do what we can for you. If that's you and you're saying, man, I got something going on that's big, I need help today, stop by there. It's right out here in our lobby. You'll see the sign for it. We would love to be there for you today. Let's pray together before we close out the service. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the strategic connections that are forming all over this place, Lord. I can just see it. People are connecting, sending texts. Some people are getting texts, sending texts. All kinds of things are happening. Conversations are going to be started today that are going to unravel a lot of junk in people's lives. But Lord, through all the pain and all the heartache and all the junk that we get out, Lord, I thank you for the healing that will happen on the other side of this. Lord, many of us have been living incomplete lives, and today is the first step towards freedom. Yeah, we've been going to church. Yeah, we've been Christians for a long time, but we've been carrying some baggage and some junk that we've just not been willing to let go of. And Lord, I just thank you that today is the day that people from here to everywhere where they're watching online, that people are letting go of some junk that's been holding them back. Lord, thank you for freedom. You said who the Son sets free is free indeed. Lord, I thank you for freedom all over this place and for those watching online. In Jesus' name, everybody said, amen.